Our fam, our fam, our fam, our fam. Every single person said our fam, which is a surprise. I think long term, our fam, sure. I think they're going to draft AZ, and I don't think it's going to be a bad decision to draft AZ because I do think AZ is a sure thing. They're going to draft AZ. The Yukon link, the link with Page. The only reason you wouldn't draft AZ is if you're scared of the shit that's going to happen with the Aces next year. And the Nalissa Smith issue or situation with the Fever and Dijonay and
a recent survey of WNBA media members collected predictions and opinions on both the upcoming WNBA draft and the expansion draft, producing some genuinely interesting takes worth examining closely. On the question of who the Dallas Wings should select with the #1 overall pick, the overwhelming consensus among media respondents pointed to a Wack-Heuer. The reasoning behind that choice separates into two distinct schools of thought. One camp argues the Wings are nowhere near playoff contention and therefore have no business drafting for immediate production. They need to build their own foundation rather than chase a quick fix.
The Smith issue or situation with the Fever and Dijonay and all of that nonsense potentially happening, but I don't think something like that would happen with AZ and Page, even if it doesn't work out. So at the end of the day, I think they're probably going to take AZ. I would take our fam, but they're probably going to take AZ foot. What's the Minnesota Lynx biggest need? Olivia Miles. Biggest need for any team is reliant on what it looks like with free agency. Sure. Not sure they have a glaring need. They can find a role for anybody. They need more depth in the front court.
The other camp simply views Heuer as the highest upside player in the class, regardless of organizational direction, pointing to her dominance at the U19 level as evidence of long-term star potential, though some noted that Inez Ajanovic may have been equally impressive at the same age. Despite the near-unanimous media consensus around Heuer, the stronger likelihood based on circumstantial factors is that Dallas selects Azura Stevens, or more precisely, the player in this class, with the Yukon connection to Paige Buchers. The reasoning is straightforward. She represents a safer, more certain return, and the franchise link between her and Buchers creates an obvious organizational narrative. The hesitation around that pick would center on how a similarly awkward dynamic comparable to situations that played out with Nalessa Smith and the Fever could develop over time.
They can find a role for anybody. They need more depth in the front court. Betts are found to provide size for defensive-minded team. I still think Lauren Betts is just T.R. McCown. What player best fits the Seattle Storm? Why did I think there was... Oh, yeah, sorry. Some of these were for... It's just for normal draft. But it's the draft, not the expansion draft. Sorry, with the expansion teams talking about it. Who's the best fit for the Storm? Choice between Olivia Miles, Kiki Rice, or Flaujae? I mean, it depends on what they're doing. NECA's not going to play forever. They do with Malonga. I mean, they might just say...
But the general read is that the Buchers-related pick is unlikely to generate the same kind of friction, making her the probable selection even if Heuer is the choice most analysts would personally make. For the Minnesota Lynx, the obvious answer to their biggest draft need is Olivia Miles. Several respondents noted that Minnesota does not have a truly glaring weakness, but added depth in the frontcourt would be welcome. One notable mention was Lauren Betts as a player who could provide size for a defensively oriented team, though there is a persistent view among some observers that Betts is essentially a collegiate-level player whose skill set does not translate cleanly to the professional game.
Hey, Tanaka and Skyler, you know what? We actually can't afford to keep you. We're just going to bring in Gabby Williams. We're going to stink next year. And I think they have their pick next year. Unless maybe Washington has it in the Sykes trade. I have no idea. Miles the best fit for the Storm. I agree. I actually fully agree with that. I do think Miles is going to go 2 no matter what, though. And I think that... I don't think they take Betts. They might take Flaujae, you know. They might take Flaujae.
On the question of best fit for the Seattle Storm, the conversation got more nuanced. The Storm face a situation where Nneka Ogwumike is not going to play forever, and with Skylar Diggins-Smith's future uncertain, there is a legitimate possibility Seattle pivots toward a rebuild, potentially bringing in Gabby Williams and accepting a down year while positioning for a stronger future draft class. Miles was identified as the strongest fit for Seattle among the remaining options. If both Miles and the top pick are off the board, the consensus leans toward the Storm, potentially selecting Flaujae Johnson, with Kiki Rice also viewed as a reasonable outcome depending on how the board falls.
So, if Olivia Miles were drafted top 2, who should the Storm select? I think they have to go with Pham. I don't think they do. I don't think they have two young bigs. Like, I don't think it's one of those things where they're going to want two of them. I think if Foot and Miles are gone, I think Kiki Rice fits in well. I think Kiki Rice isn't a bad player. I just don't. If you're the Storm, you're kind of praying that Easy Foot lands in your lap. But like,
on projected draft order, a wide view of the consensus suggests Lauren Betts and Kiki Rice going in some order early in the lottery, followed by Haley Van Lith and possibly Gannon Weke, with Sedona Prince or Lexi Walden rounding out the top group. Predicting Nweke ahead of Rice was flagged as a questionable call by several respondents, and placing Eladu Ogi ahead of Walden was described as a genuine surprise. The most discussed potential shock of the draft is Betts falling out of the lottery entirely. The scenario is plausible. If Washington passes at 4 and Chicago passes at 5, both expansion teams would have a shot at her, but either could prioritize a guard instead, particularly given how many serviceable frontcourt options exist in free agency.
Kind of praying that Easy Foot lands in your lap. But like, Flaujae might be the best option if you are Seattle. Probably take Famby's, the value is so high. But which order will the starting five be drafted? Whoever predicted Gianna Neepkins to be taken before Kiki Rice is crazy. Like, it's going to be Betts, Rice, whichever order of those two, and then whichever order of Neepkins or Haquez, and then Ledger Walker. That'd be my assumption. Let's do top 6.
The specific framing offered was that an expansion team might look at a 6'7" big who struggles against pick-and-roll coverage and simply pass, knowing they can find that profile elsewhere. The most firmly rejected prediction in the entire survey was the idea of either Toronto or Portland trading for Angel Reese. The argument against it is airtight. Reese is an all-star on a heavily cost-controlled contract, making roughly $130,000 less than the projected number 1 pick in this draft. With 2 more years of cost protection remaining, she also sells tickets.
Let's do top 6. Predicting Dugalich to be drafted ahead of Ledger Walker is a surprise. Personally, draft Kiki ahead of Lauren, so would I. Rice, Betts, Haquez, Neepkins, Ledger Walker could happen. Betts, Kiki Rice, biggest shock of the draft. Betts falls out of the lottery. That could very well happen, by the way. Like, if Betts goes past 3, Washington don't take her a 4, Chicago don't take her a 5. So then she's there for an expansion.
For an expansion team to acquire her, they would need to offer a package including multiple top picks from the expansion draft itself plus future first-round assets. A straight swap of Reese for the 6th overall pick was described as completely unrealistic. If Reese gets traded at any point, the return would need to include a top 2 pick and at least one additional significant asset. The idea of her going for a mid-lottery pick was dismissed outright.
Or Chicago don't take her a 5. So then she's there for an expansion team, and an expansion team might want a guard. The expansion teams might just say, fuck it, we've already got a couple of bigs, we can get these bigs in free agency, we want a guard. Like, if we want a 6'7" big that can't guard the pick and roll, Tierra McCown's available. So at the end of the day, that's an interesting one. Betts falls out of top 5, and Portland trades the pick for a vet star. I don't think they do that. Portland, and this is the craziest one. This is what I really...
Janiyah Barker was projected to slide toward the end of the 2nd round, with the general feeling being that she has not broken through despite the surrounding expectations. The comparison drawn was to Nalessa Smith's similar overall profile, slightly better as a jump shooter, slightly weaker on the boards, with the same core limitations. On international prospects, Jana Martin drew considerable attention.
I think she's a really, really good role player. Sophie Cunningham, nobody is showing up to watch a basketball game to watch Sophie Cunningham play. Let's be real about this. She might sell some jerseys. So will Haley Van Lith. So will Kate Martin. Kate Martin will sell more jerseys than Sophie Cunningham. They will sell enough jerseys by drafting Kate Martin and HVL. If it's all about social media following, why not just sign Haley Cab?
She recently won World Cup MVP honors over competitors including Hannah Kluk, Madison Booker, and Joyce Edwards, and has been performing at an elite level in the EuroLeague. The turnover concerns around her were largely dismissed as secondary to her competitive drive and overall impact. Nika Mule was viewed as a potential late lottery surprise, someone teams clearly evaluated favorably, similar to how J.C. Sheldon was perceived before being drafted ahead of expectations.
If it's all about social media following, why not just sign Hailey Cavender in free agency? And I understand Sophie Cunningham is on a different stratosphere of player to Hailey Cavender. But like, if you're going to be offering Sophie Cunningham $1.4 million Supermax, you may as well be just giving a roster spot to Hailey Cavender at that stage. And that's not a knock on Sophie, but like, if you're giving Sophie Cunningham, saying Sophie Cunningham is a really good player and saying Sophie Cunningham should get the Supermax are two very different things. And by protecting Sophie Cunningham, you are assuming
Nell Angloma was identified as a player who could either fall or rise unexpectedly depending on organizational priorities. Players like Do Gi, Van Lith, and Astun Dorfall were described as rotation-caliber players with solid professional futures but without the kind of ceiling that puts them in star conversations. On the question of highest upside across the entire class, the three names that appeared most consistently in media responses were Kuier, Olivia Miles, and either Flau J. Johnson or the top overall prospect, depending on the respondent.
Should get the Supermax are two very different things. And by protecting Sophie Cunningham, you are assuming she is going to get the Supermax. She is a 30-year-old, zero-time All-Star, bench player, really good bench player or fifth starter, coming off an MCL tear and a season of ankle injuries. What are we doing? How many games did Sophie Cunningham play last year? I'll be interested to see. How many games did Sophie play last year?
The broad takeaway from the survey was clear media consensus views Kuier as the most talented player in this draft class. The strategic question for Dallas ultimately comes down to organizational philosophy. A franchise genuinely committed to long-term building, potentially positioning itself to attract Buchers, Madison Booker, or Cluck in future years, while pairing incoming talent with Page's final rookie contract season makes Kuier the obvious answer.
And by the way, Sophie, really good shooter, really good role player. Great if she's the fifth best player on your team. But like, she missed 14. She started 13 games last year. She started 13 games. She's been a bench player more than half of her career. I get it. 43% from three, a career high, and she will continue to do that with Caitlin Clark. But like, Sophie Cunningham,
a franchise willing to be more aggressive in the short term, perhaps overpaying for a veteran presence while Buchers is still on a rookie deal, might view the calculus differently. Whether going for it in year one is the right call for Dallas remains an open and genuinely debated question. CBS Sports has officially announced a new long-term media rights agreement with the WNBA, featuring up to 20 regular season games annually on the CBS television network and Paramount+.
But like, Sophie Cunningham, like, even on a bad team, 2033 Phoenix Mercury, Sophie Cunningham averaged 11 points a game. She averaged 11 points a game on a really bad Phoenix Mercury team. So what's going to happen with a bad expansion team? But I don't even know why we're talking about this. No expansion team's going to get her. Sophie Cunningham, if the Indiana Fever can come to a deal with Sophie Cunningham will be a member of the Indiana Fever. They don't need to protect her. If you guys want Sophie...
The 2026 season will carry the full slate of 20 broadcasts, the largest number of WNBA games the network has ever aired on free television. The announcement also confirmed the studio team that will handle pregame, halftime, and postgame coverage. Nate Smith, Basketball Hall of Famer Lisa Leslie, former WNBA player Renee Montgomery, and CBS Sports reporter Jenny Dell. The network framed the deal as a reflection of the league's growth and cultural momentum, with CBS Sports Executive Vice President of Programming Dan Weinberg describing the expanded partnership as an effort to broaden the league's reach, with coverage that reflects the quality of its athletes.
If you're going to get back, subscribe. We are trying to get to 57.8k by the end of the day. We need 8 more subscribers to do that. That being said, I want Sophie Cunningham back for the Fever. I do. I think it's really hard to find a 43% three-point shooter who does it on low volume, who's versatile enough to play at a 1-2, who's versatile enough that they can stand in and play possessions at the 1, can play the 2, can play the 3, can play possessions at the 4. I'm okay with that player. Like, genuinely.
The promotional graphic released alongside the announcement drew immediate notice for what it omitted. Caitlin Clark, the most recognizable name in the sport, was not featured front and center. The more charged reaction, however, centered on Montgomery's inclusion. A significant portion of the fan base has not moved past comments she made about Clark's supporters during the 2024 rookie season.
Can play possessions at the 4. I'm okay with that player. Like, genuinely. It is really difficult to find that player. Really, really difficult. And I'm like, she was second in the league in true shooting percentage. But like, you don't supermax that player. And by the way, Sophie Cunningham, people are like, oh, Sophie Cunningham will take she'll take a pay cut. Oh yeah, she'll take a pay cut. But if she gets offered $1.4 million or even $1.2 million from an expansion team, she's going to take.
On her podcast, Montgomery questioned the authenticity of Clark's fan base, suggesting that many of her followers were not genuine basketball fans and were primarily interested in social media conflict rather than the game itself. She denied she was singling out Clark fans specifically, though the remarks were directed at them explicitly. That was not the only moment that stuck.
She's going to take the money. Like, for $1.2 million, she is obviously going to take that money. She's going to take that money. And on a long-term deal. But she's not going to get offered that money. Why? Because they are allowed to take, each team is allowed to take one unrestricted free agent. One. And players that are likely, what team?
Earlier, Montgomery weighed in on the controversy surrounding Clark fans and Angel Reese during that first season, characterizing certain behavior attributed to Clark's supporters in stark terms and invoking an analogy involving fabricated explicit imagery allegedly sent to Reese and her family. No verified evidence of that claim was ever publicly established, but the remarks circulated widely and became a fixture in ongoing debates about how the Clark fanbase was being portrayed by people with platforms inside the league's ecosystem. Montgomery holds a notable position beyond broadcasting. She is a part owner and vice president of the Atlanta Dream, a franchise that recently relocated 2 home games to State Farm Arena.